St. Louis is being retrofitted. Most of the biggest highways in the area have been strengthened. And tomorrow morning, one of the hugest viaducts, the one on Grand Avenue, is being torn down, closing a major road that every day carries over 55,000 cars on it. But tomorrow it's closed down, so that for the next year and more, it can be secured so that we can be safe. And even now, pilings are being dug deep down into the bedrock underneath the Mississippi River, 80 feet through the sand to get to the bedrock, to build a major new bridge. All to keep us safe if St. Louis ever has the big one. As most of you know, St. Louis is built very close to a major fault line. Damage here, if the earthquake were ever to strike, could be severe. So unless those pilings go deep down into the bedrock, just underneath that soft earth, St. Louis is being retrofitted. It might be time for all of us to do a little retrofitting of our lives. And with Lent beginning just this coming Wednesday, I can't think of a better time to do it. But first, we got to know the difference between sand and rock. And if we think we do, if we think we know, we must not. Because we keep choosing to build our lives on sand and not on rock. And the wisdom to know the difference between sand and rock is hard won. I built several houses on the sand before the message got home to me. Maybe that's why I value rock so much. Maybe because I learned how to substitute the word sand for sin. I see how sinful it has been for me to have turned good things into gods. That's sand. Good things, like a person, like a career, like even a vocation. Those things are good. Those things are gifts from God. But they're not God. They are not God. To build on sand is to base my happiness on what cannot bear the weight of my happiness. The weight of our deepest longings in life. That can be anything, that can be anyone who cannot possibly meet up to my expectations. That can be anything or anyone that is limited and finite, that passes away, and that will all continually leave all of us searching for something else that will fill that indescribable ache that afflicts every single human heart. And it's not just our lives, it's not just our relationships that collapse under this weight, if not grounded in the right stuff. It happens to everything. It happens to governments too. if they are built on sand? We're seeing it all over the Middle East right now, in countries one after another whose governments are collapsing and some teetering on the brink of it, even tonight. It's what happens if the pilings are not deep in the bedrock. And it's not just governments. It's what happens to businesses too, if they're built on sand. And even churches, if they're not grounded in the right stuff, if they're not in the bedrock. We build too often, my friends, you and I, we build too often on things that do not last. A story I've told before goes back maybe 10, 12 years ago now. I was up in Center Court, now Bears Den, and I was meeting some students for dinner, and after dinner I saw a student, and he was a student who came here constantly his first year and a half for 3 semesters every Sunday, like religion. But all of a sudden, I hadn't seen him. I didn't see him for a while, for a long time, maybe 3 more semesters. And I ran into him that night, and I struck up a conversation, and near the end of it, I said, "Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? I haven't seen you for a while. Is everything okay?" Now, I got to tell you, when a priest asks a student that question, a lot of times they get very defensive, and words come tumbling out like, "Oh, I've been so busy, Father," you know. But this guy didn't go there. He said, "Oh, I don't need church anymore." He said, "I don't really need church. I have a great friend group, Father. And my friend group is everything to me, and they're really, really awesome, and everything I need is right there. It's just great." And I said, "Oh," and left. And then, as I said, those semesters passed, and then all of a sudden, I saw him walking out of church. I said, "Oh my gosh, it's good to see you again. What brought you back?" And he said, "Oh, you know that friend group I told you about?" He said, "Some are studying abroad now, and some of those friendships didn't work out very well." You know, friendships are really great. They are great. And there's probably no finer window to God than a good friend. But friendship is just a window. And if we expect great friendships, as great as they are, if we expect them to last, they can't give us that. If we expect them to give us what they can't, it's not going to work. And our families too, the same way. Families are great gifts to us, but they're not God. Our families, as great as they are, they won't last. I know that's a terrifying thing to think about, but it's the truth. I've done too many funerals to know anything less than that to be true. And I've stood with too many students as their parents have gone through divorces that they never saw coming to think that anything less than that is true. They too pass. I want you to be well. Whether you are a student here tonight or a senior citizen, I want you to be well. And we've got to start working on this stuff now. We've got to start digging these pilings deep into the bedrock now if we're going to be well. It's not enough that things are going along well. It's not enough. And because they're going so well, this relationship, this career, this degree, this school, whatever it is, we think, why mess with it really? Why do the work of maybe counseling right now? Why go to that workshop? Why go to that marriage enrichment program? Things are fine. Why read that book? It might unsettle me. It might make me think about something I'd rather not right now. I'm just humming along, you know? Fine. But someday they won't. That'd be like saying, you know, so far so good, no earthquake. Why tear down that bridge? Why spend all that money? Why put in all those hours? Why inconvenience 55,000 people a day? Things are fine. We haven't had an earthquake for 100 years. What are you worried about? Is that how you want to live your life? What's the truth of your life? And if it inconveniences you for a time to make hard decisions or to look at stuff you've never looked at, is that an excuse? Because you're fine right now? If we don't start doing it now, when? After the earthquake? Oh, I wish I would have retrofitted that bridge. I wish I would have done the work on being more vulnerable in that relationship earlier. I wish I would have learned a little more about how to handle conflict. I wish I would have had a relationship with God that was working. But if we start doing it now, the coolest thing is we can get better and better at this the rest of our lives. And I got to tell you, living as long as I have now and being a priest for as many years as I've been a priest, I have the long view. Good things collapse. And I want you to be well. I want you to live your life based on the rock, on what will last. And I want to too. The bedrock is really just two words. Divine love. In one word, God. The bedrock, the only thing that can really be our security, that can really keep us safe, that can really sustain us over the long haul, no matter the earthquakes of life, is to build our lives on divine love. And whether we got to bore down 40 feet like you have to in the city of St. Louis, or 80 feet like you have to under the Mississippi River Bridge, or 30,000 feet like you have to get to bedrock in New Orleans, we got to get to it. And to build our life on divine love is this. I want myself to know my divinity. And I want you to know your divinity. As one of the mystics, early theologians of the church said, God became human so that human can become God. I want you to know your divinity. I want you to know your God-given goodness. The good that is within you. That nothing you could ever do or anybody else could ever do to you will ever take away from you. I want you to know that you are radically okay. And nothing in this world can tell you that but one, the one who made you. In theology, we call this the divine indwelling. It's the truest thing. To get to that bedrock, to get to that place where God lives, will take some major pile driving. Like carving out in our everyday life whatever it takes to get to that deep down place. Like more prayer time. You've heard me say it before. I know it gets you there. It gets you straight there. Directly there. Like a little more quiet time. To sit in the backyard, to stop in here in the evening, to walk on campus by yourself. Just to think about your life. Your life. It's worth thinking about. Like remembering, somehow reminding yourself that you're loved, that you're loved no matter and in the midst of any stress that comes your way. Like perhaps adding a weekday Mass to your week during these Lenten days. Or spending more time with the truly, truly poor. Gosh, I look at the students, the 6 getting ready for their service trip over spring break to the mountains of Appalachia, to the poorest of the poor in this country. I think of IST going to Kenya a year ago, and this past Christmas going to Peru, working with some of the poorest folks you can ever imagine. That's going to drill deep. That's going to drill so deep. You cannot be with the truly poor without getting to the bedrock. But there's Bible studies too. You could join our spiritual reading. We got an awesome spiritual library downstairs. It's great books. It's not totally organized. I keep thinking it's going to happen. I don't know. But I was walking through the house last night. It was 2 in the morning this morning, and I was walking through the house, maybe 1:30, and there was a student sitting in there. She had been studying upstairs, and she decided to take a break and wandered down to the library and got totally lost in a book she just randomly took off the shelf. You're going on spring break, or when you go home for the summer. I know you don't have a ton of time to read now, but what would we like to grab a book about God? About how to pray? And take some time to read. To retrofit our lives means that we have to maybe close down some grand avenues in our lives, so to speak. So we got to muster some of the courage it's going to take to change some old patterns of relationship that are starting to collapse, and we know it. Maybe even careers, if that's what it takes to get to the bedrock. St. Louis is retrofitting itself. I think it's time for all of us to retrofit our lives. Lent this week is saying, do it now. Do it now. Because if we don't, when life's earthquakes come, if we don't,